Summer can be a bit of a slog. For us, it's often for some reason a rather busy time, and I'm sure we're not alone.
Well, you can beat the summertime sadness and the August angst and enhance your everyday with our excellent sponsor, Via Hemp. This is a company that crafts award-winning premium THC and THC-free gummies.
Each of these gummies is especially designed to cultivate a specific mood. Whether you're looking to get relaxed, get quality sleep, get creative, or just to get focused. If you're 21 or older, you can experience it for yourself and get 15% off your first order with our exclusive code IMSHEET at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
I personally enjoyed their grapefruit flow state gummies. This CBG and CBD powerhouse really helped me tap into my productivity. Like, we have had an extremely busy summer, and I feel flow state got me over the finish line a few times when I was editing multiple episodes a day, digging through documents, and knocking out a bunch of interviews.
Via Hemp does not require a medical card, and it ships legally to all 50 states. It's also affordable, and even more so for Murder Sheet listeners who get a special deal.
If you're 21 and older, head to viahemp.com and use code MSHEET to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use code MSHEET at checkout. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Have you ever covered a carpet stain with a rug? Ignored a leaky faucet? Pretended your half-painted living room is supposed to look like that? Well, you're not alone. We've all got unfinished home projects. But there's an easier way. Thumbtack is the app that makes it easier to care for your home. Pull out your phone and in just a few taps, search, chat, and book highly rated pros right in your neighborhood. Download Thumbtack and start caring for your home the easier way.
Content warning, this episode contains discussion of the murder of 2 girls.
So we have all been waiting for Prosecutor Nick McLeland to file his response to the defense attorney's latest motion for a Frank's hearing. He has done that. And along the way, Judge Gull has also made a ruling that may have a serious impact on the future of this case and its ultimate outcome. And we will talk about both of those in just a few minutes.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is The Delphi Murders, state's response to defense's third motion for Frank's hearing.
So before we get into the state's response to the motion for the third Frank's hearing, let's just take a moment to talk about the order that Judge Gull signed today.
Absolutely. This is a brief order, but it may have a pretty stringent impact on this case. So Gull has ruled on the state's motion for leave of court to subpoena third-party records in the case of both mental health records and medical records. That was originally filed on March 14th, and she's had an outcome now.
She's given the state the ability to access some mental and medical health records for Richard Allen. This is something that the two sides have been going back and forth on for a while. The state has maintained that they believe the defense is going to be using Richard Allen's mental health as part of their case. And if so, he should have a right to those records. And the defense has maintained that there's certain privacy rights in play.
So obviously privacy rights make sense. Just because you're incarcerated doesn't necessarily mean that the state has access to every single thing that you're doing, especially with sensitive stuff like mental or medical records. That being said, from the state's perspective, if the defense is giving indications that they are going to bring into issue, he said this because he's having a mental health breakdown, here's what he was doing, then that they have a right to be able to analyze those and see what the experts are actually saying about him. Does he have a mental health condition? Is he malingering? What's going on here? So those were the two sides of this. And Gull has now come down on the side of the prosecution and has said, after a number of times where she ruled against the prosecution on this, maybe some indication that there is going to be some mental health stuff within this defense.
And there are certainly, if you follow developments in this case on social media, there are all sorts of interesting rumors about what may or may not be included in those mental health records. We have not been able to verify.
Yeah, we ignore. I mean, if something's just people are just chatting about it, or it's like, whatever. I mean, for me, rumors might as well not exist. Like, we can note them, and just half the time they're deadly wrong. So I would just encourage people to keep an open mind with this and not necessarily assume that's going to be one thing or another. It's just it certainly will have an impact, though, because if the defense is planning on mounting some kind of mental health defense, that doesn't mean that they're ditching the actual innocence defense. All it has to mean is oh, he was mentally ill or having a mental episode when he confessed. It can be a minimal defense there, but it's still that still would be important. So it's now basically the judge saying it's important enough that the prosecution gets a peek too.
And also just keep in mind, if everything goes on schedule, which I know you are very skeptical of, Anya, but if everything goes on schedule, we will all find out what is in those records in a little over a month when the trial happens. I'm
going to tell you, I feel like this defense team has been stringently contorting itself in order to try to avoid this outcome. So I imagine this is not favorable in their perspective. I feel like when they initially were dealing with the alleged incriminating statements that Richard Allen made to his wife and mother, they were going with something mental health related in a way that I thought made sense, that this man is having some kind of psychotic episode, and that's why this happened. But they completely abandoned that in their kind of outline of their theory of the case in the Franks memorandum that they famously filed, where they went towards more of a Odinist guards may have forced him to confess. Who knows? We have no evidence of this, but maybe that's what happened. And to me, the only reason that you would go with something as weak as that, because if you don't have any evidence, you shouldn't be putting it in your filing, frankly. It just looks bad, frankly. And I would say that the reason that you pivot from something that is makes sense and could happen to something that you have no evidence and you're just sort of speculating about wildly in a footnote is because you really don't want mental health to become an issue at trial. You are contorting to get away from that. And it sounds like they won't be able to necessarily now. So I will wonder if this impacts their strategy at all.
So with that said, let's move on to the state's response to defense's third motion for a Franks hearing. As I'm sure you all recall, the defense filed a motion basically saying, and we'll go into more detail on this in a moment, but basically saying Tony Liggett, who's now the sheriff of Carroll County, when he prepared the search warrant for Richard Allen's home, he left out crucial geofencing information that, if included, would have tended to exonerate Richard Allen, and therefore the warrant should be invalidated. That was their first point. And the second point they made was that Lieutenant Jerry Holman of the Indiana State Police, they alleged that he misrepresented a report. He misrepresented an interview he had with an expert on Odinism. So let's talk about both of those. Can we start? Do you want to start with talking about the geofencing?
Yeah, let's talk about the geofencing. So
if we say what they said, what the defense said?
Yeah, let's go into what they said and then what McLeland's response was.
So what did they say?
So what the defense is arguing is that geofencing data from the crime scene, on February 13th, I believe, or at least around the time of the murders, is that there basically that data was collected indicating that 3 phone numbers popped up on this geofencing map that was created later. And what they're arguing is that those 3 phones are, I guess, unaccounted for.
And so essentially they're saying we have 3 phones in the vicinity of the crime scene at the time the crime is happening. And so how can Richard Allen have done this if there's these 3 other people here? Are these 3 other people witnesses? Are they participants in the crime?
Well, on the surface, it's a wonderful argument for their theory, because suddenly we have 3 new people or 3 unidentified people who are wandering around. That lends credence on the surface to the idea that a large group of men were participating in an Odinist sacrifice that day and committed these crimes. Or even if you say, well, maybe the phones don't belong to the killers, you could say, well, if these 3 people were here and they didn't see Richard Allen, was he here? Some people identified him, but others seemingly didn't even notice him. And
we're getting into detail on McLeland's response, but to sum up, I'm going to read one line from, I believe it's the top of page 3. McLeland writes, quote, "Unfortunately, the defense do not understand how to read or interpret geofencing data, and once again have misinterpreted the information and have put misinformation in their motion," end quote.
That's pretty brutal. That's pretty devastating.
That's pretty devastating.
And basically he proceeds to break down how geofencing data works and how it doesn't work and why their claims are not really accurate, I guess, would be a way of putting it.
He says, correct me if I'm wrong, the way geofencing works, it doesn't pinpoint an exact location of where a person is. It indicates an area where a person could be. And the point you see, I believe, is at the center of that area.
Yeah. There was a time, if you live near, let's say, a Walmart, right? And you're at home, but you live close enough to the Walmart. If someone were to look at geofencing data for you, it might show your phone, not where you physically were, but just in the approximate location. And if someone were to look at that and said, say Kevin Greenlee was at this Walmart at the time, then that wouldn't necessarily be accurate, because that's not what geofencing data does. It does not put you in a specific position. It puts you in an approximate location. So let's actually get into some of the technical aspects.
And the approximate location may be very approximate. It may be within thousands of feet.
It's not some sort of tracker where people are able to watch you walk around in real time. Yeah. At least as far as this 2017 data goes.
I didn't mean to interrupt. You said we should get into it.
We need to get into it because, listen, this is not something that I am necessarily well versed in. You and I are not technological people. So I wanted to read this and quote it directly so people can understand what we're talking about and we're not just summing it up. So this is a quote from this filing. AT&T collects data from devices to include geolocation data. AT&T geolocation information is gathered from 3 sources. GPS first, known as Wi-Fi triangulation locations second, and cell sites or timing advance, which occurs when a signal is sent from the cell tower to the device, then back to the tower. GPS, if received, can be very good with an estimated accuracy range of 3 to 15 meters. Wi-Fi or triangulation estimated ranges vary between 15 and 100 meters, and cell sites or timing advance can range up to several thousand meters. The cell sites or timing advance is inaccurate because the geofencing data estimates where the phone is at based on how long it takes the signal to go from the tower to the cell phone and back again. This means that the device can be 3 to 15 meters from the pinpoint on the map, up to several thousand meters, depending on how the information was collected from the device to the tower. When interpreting geolocation data, you can only consider that the device is somewhere in or near to the estimated range area that AT&T provides. Thus, if a AT&T geolocation and a geofence provided a Wi-Fi location with a center point on the Carroll County Courthouse, one could deduct that the location is in a range of 15 to 100 meters from or around that center point. If that same scenario included a cell site or timing advance location, the actual location of the device could be in a range of 1,000 meters plus from where the pinpoint is located. That could include the entire town of Delphi and beyond. When a person is in a rural area, oftentimes GPS and Wi-Fi location services are not available. Therefore, AT&T must resort to cell site location data. This is not an accurate way to pinpoint the location of a device. Further, geofencing does not track movement. So the fact that a pinpoint moves within a certain area is not indicative of a phone moving within that area. The map that the defense refer to is actually geofence data from AT&T. The points on the map represent GPS longitude and latitude points provided as part of a geofence from AT&T. Each longitude and latitude point has a range of uncertainty. That the point is not where the phone is, it is simply the center point of the measurement. So even though the longitude and latitude point is near the crime scene, the actual phone could be more than 5,000 meters away from the point in any direction. The points have no date or time associated with them on the map, and so the map does not indicate what date and time the phone hit on that pinpoint. All this information was provided to the defense in spreadsheet form with discovery. They either choose to ignore that information or did not understand how to read the information.
That seems pretty devastating. And I also would like...
This is something that we've heard from people who actually know about geofencing, though, talking to people on background or behind the scenes. Some people have told us that maybe geofencing has gotten better or there's been changes over time, but we're talking about 2017 here. And it certainly sounds like, and this is something I've heard in other cases, that these geofences are helpful tools, but they are not showing, like if you imagine us doing a bird's eye view and seeing, phones as little red dots, they're not showing us, the red dot is not necessarily showing us where the person is at every moment. It is a general approximation that in this case, because Delphi is quite rural, sounds like it could be off by a lot.
I also want to make one more point here. I want to quote another line from this section of the filing. Quote, "The defense further fails to state that the owners of those phones were interviewed and cleared by investigators," end quote. So that's also interesting because I believe the implication we were supposed to take from the defense filing was that the owners of these phones were unknown, perhaps odinous, perhaps some of the suspects.
Or witnesses who were never properly talked to.
And McLeland is asserting very clearly that that is not true. These people have been identified and interviewed and cleared.
I just don't even know. I don't even know why you would put that in your defense filing.
I have some stuff I'd like to say about that. But before I do, it also relates to the next section, which is the section about Professor Turco. Professor Turco is the Purdue professor who was famously interviewed by investigators to help determine whether or not the sticks at the crime scene were meant to indicate that a ritual killing had taken place. So,
to be clear, Jeffrey Turco is often, I just want to say something because he's often billed in these legal filings as an Odinist expert. That, to me, is not really the case. His website Purdue website says he specializes in Old Norse Icelandic literature, medieval German literature, Germanic folklore and mythography, Wagner medieval Italian literature. So he has a range of expertise, but you're seeing a common theme here, and it's literature, medieval. This is a person who is going to have some value in terms of understanding things that might appear in some sort of Odinist ritual because he has the basis in Norse mythology. But this is not somebody who is studying modern day white nationalist, white supremacist movements like Odinism and having something to say directly about what that looks like today.
And another thing I want to say before I stop talking and let you proceed is that another thing about Professor Turco is that it has certainly been suggested by the defense that he is a blockbuster witness. He's someone who supports their view of things. And so because of that, information about him and his views has been suppressed, that the state has tried to keep the defense from even knowing this man's name. The state has tried to misrepresent this or that about his testimony. So this must be a bombshell witness.
Yes, this is a man who's going to blow the whole thing wide open from their previous filings. This is the indication that they put out there, that they chose to put out there for some reason.
So I'll stop talking, let you introduce this Turco section.
So the defense's contention centers around Lieutenant Jerry Holman of the state police, and essentially that he not only hid Professor Turco from the defense, but that he, in fact, provided a very, very inaccurate, essentially a lie of a summary of Turco's interview and his statements. Essentially what the defense is alleging is Holman treated this like a game of broken telephone, where Turco tells Holman, yeah, those are definitely Odinist runes. And then Holman reports back to the defense, yeah, he said they weren't Odinist runes. And then the defense looks at the actual, or it listens to the actual tape of the interview and finds out, actually, Turco agrees with us. They even cited portions of that, two, I think, snippets from that interview that they say shows that Turco completely agrees with us, and he's, like Holman lied. So that all sounds pretty bad.
They even went so far as that they quoted Holman's summary of an interview, and then they said, this is inaccurate. Here's what the real summary should be. And they wrote their own summary.
Yes.
And as it turns out, Professor Turco himself was asked which summary is more accurate, and he picked the summary provided by the summary provided by Lieutenant Holman.
So, let's go into specifically what was said here.
Well, another point I want to make is that it has been suggested that in the report Turco filed, he was talking about how the sticks were runes.
So sticks were left upon the bodies of the two girls.
But this is the first time we're hearing a quote from this report, from the introduction to the report, and I'm quoting from the introduction to Professor Turco's report. Quote, the following are conjectures based on the working assumption that these lines do in fact constitute a runic or runically inspired inscription, end quote. So he was asked when he was preparing the report to assume they were runes and go from there. That's different from him concluding on his own that they are runes. If I ask Anya to write a report assuming I'm a space alien, and she writes a report based on that assumption, that doesn't necessarily mean that she in fact believes I am a space alien. I'm giving her a premise and asking her to elaborate on it.
It's a way of getting someone to boil down their analysis to give the best case, or to kind of give the strongest argument in favor of something, and as you weigh it.
So judging from that, it feels, frankly, like the Turco report has been misrepresented. And it's certainly striking to me that Professor Turco himself says in his deposition that the summary prepared by Lieutenant Holman, that was so derided by the defense, he says that is an accurate summary. And so the defense, it would seem, has been...
But let's read some of this, because I feel like it's important for people to understand what we're talking about here. But before we begin, I just want to say that when they first came out with some of those Turco lines, it made me somewhat, I think suspicious is far too strong a word, but it gave me pause that they only really seemed to quote Turco in two instances, two snippets, because I felt like it would be very easy to cherry pick something. But I figured that whatever Turco said would be at least more nuanced than what has come out in this. And certainly I didn't expect this level of, I don't even know what to call this. To me, some of this is shocking.
Okay, it's time to commit. 2024 is the year for prioritizing yourself. Begin your new smile journey with Byte, and you could start seeing results in just 2 to 3 weeks. Just order your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95 at Byte.com. Byte clear liners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces, plus they offer financing options, accept eligible insurance, and you could pay with your HSA, FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
This episode is sponsored by AutoTrader. Credit scores, down payments, interest rates. Car buying can be a numbers game, but you don't have to be a math expert to get the keys to your dream car. Just use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. Crunch your numbers and get your personalized results so you know exactly how much you'll pay each month for your car. It's like having a magic wand for your wallet. Presto, the car you've been wanting is now within reach. So hit the road and leave your calculator at home. Find your next car on autotrader.com.
Why don't you go into some of the meat of it?
Sure. So I guess, should I just start from the top, or is there a specific paragraph? I mean, I just don't even know where to begin here.
One thing is that Professor Turco notes that, as far as he knows, never in human history has there been a sacrificial killing of Odinism. Pardon me. Nowhere in the recorded history of Odinism has a sacrificial killing of children occurred. And if by some slight chance that this is that, it would be the only one in recorded history and goes against the definition of ritual, since a ritual is something that is done over and over again. So Turco is pretty clearly saying this is not a ritual killing.
Let's go into the timeline of what exactly happened, because I also feel like that illuminates some things. So I'm going to be quoting from the document now. So, quote, "The defense alleges Lieutenant Jerry Holman interviewed Professor Jeffrey Turco and then lied about the contents of that interview and Professor Turco's statements. Lieutenant Holman interviewed Professor Turco in September 2023 at the request of the defense following his deposition. Lieutenant Holman's deposition included defense inquiry about investigative leads related to Odinism. Lieutenant Holman advised that a Purdue professor had been consulted by other investigators, but that he did not participate directly in the inquiry. The defense pressed Lieutenant Holman to re-interview the professor as to his findings and conclusions. Lieutenant Holman did a follow-up interview of Professor Turco at the defense's request. Professor Turco's initial report from 2017 clearly states in the introductory summary, it is not self-evident that these markings are runic inscriptions, nor it is immediately clear what they would mean if they were. However, the argument that these markings constitute an inscription inspired by Norse runes or modern recreations thereof is quite plausible. The following are conjectures based on the working assumption that these lines do in fact constitute a runic or runically inspired inscription. Clearly, Professor Turco was asked to assume the line formations are runes. Lieutenant Holman did not attempt to deceive the reader or leave out key information from Professor Turco's report. However, Lieutenant Holman did another interview of Professor Turco to clarify his findings at the request of the defense. The defense outlines Lieutenant Holman's summary of that second interview in paragraph 18 of their motion. The defense then outlines what they believe Lieutenant Holman's summary should have stated in his report in paragraph 22 of their motion. The parties held a deposition of Professor Turco on March 21st, 2024. At the deposition, Professor Turco stated under oath that paragraph 18 of the defense's motion more accurately reflects his opinion by comparison to that which was stated in paragraph 22.
So again, this is what we were saying earlier.
Yes.
That he is saying that Holman's summary was accurate and the defense summary was inaccurate. So, yeah.
He states bluntly that the defense's summary does not accurately reflect his opinion at all. And he also notes in his deposition that, quote, it is not clear that the sticks found on the girls represent Germanic runic script. The professor went on to debunk all the statements that the defense put in their motion, including that this was a ritualistic sacrificial killing. And then it gets to the point where this does not meet the definition of a ritual because this isn't something that happens.
And again, this is supposed to be almost a blockbuster witness that the state has been trying to hide from the defense. And this witness, it turns out, certainly is not helping the defense.
This is another quote. Quote, the defense outright lied in their motion and misrepresented the true findings of Professor Turco. Lieutenant Holman reported the truth in his statement that Turco's findings were inconclusive was correct. The defense's statement that Lieutenant Holman somehow was misleading in his report is entirely false. Okay. Yeah.
One more quote. The defense has routinely put theories and statements in their motions that are not supported by facts or any real evidence. This is yet another example of that.
This is perhaps one of the most shocking instances to me because I would imagine that it would be good practice in lawyering, forget criminal defense, but just being a lawyer to ensure that you don't go out on a branch that you don't know if it can support your weight or not, that you are, you don't go out on the frozen pond if you don't know that it can hold you. And
so you're saying they shouldn't have made such a big deal about Turco unless they were confident Turco supported them.
Yes. And the way you do that is presumably to speak to Turco, get a sense of things. You don't just pick two sentences from his initial interview and then spin out an entire narrative based on that. You make sure that this guy's going to, yes, he agrees with us and he feels it was misleading and it was misrepresented. That's great if you can do that. But if you can't, you shouldn't try because then you torch your credibility.
Yeah. And frankly, as we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, one of the defense's investigators was trying to join our Facebook pages to get information. Maybe instead of doing things like
He's trying to friend us on Facebook.
Yes. Maybe instead of doing things like that, their time would have been better spent investigating what their blockbuster witness, Professor Turco, actually believed. I want to say something here, which actually echoes something I said earlier in the week about the contempt hearing. And this wasn't planned because I certainly had no foreknowledge that this document was going to come out today. So at this point, let's be completely honest and lay all of our cards on the table. The case against Richard Allen is not a slam dunk case. So I would, as I've said before, I would love to see a trial where both sides are at the top of their game, presenting all of the best evidence and arguments they have, so that whatever verdict is reached, we can all have confidence in it. And what I am seeing from the defense pretty consistently is they make claims and assertions in filings that are then, upon further reflection, found to be either untrue or twisted or not quite right. And McLeland suggested earlier this week that perhaps some of this may be because they're test marketing different things. I don't know. But when they keep on putting things in filings that turn out not to be true, it really torches their credibility. And, well, that's all well and good if it torches their credibility with people like us. And by us, I include everybody listening. But what happens if they continue this in the trial in front of a jury? If in front of a jury, they do things like this and say, oh, Turco is so important. And then Turco comes up and says, well, we disagree with you. Or they say, oh,
or no, you're just straight up lying about me, what I said.
Or they say, oh, this geofencing proves this, and then geofencing witnesses say, you don't even understand geofencing. If they do these things, if they say things and make assertions that sound good but are immediately disproven, then they will lose the case, and Richard Allen will be convicted. And the thing is, I want to have confidence in this verdict. I would love for the defense, frankly, to be doing better than this. Focus on the key pieces of evidence against him. I would love to see detailed analysis of the ballistics evidence. How much stock can we put into it, for instance? The confessions, all that stuff. Focus on that instead of making these assertions on unrelated issues that blow up in your face and make it very hard to believe anything you say. I think at this point, again, to paraphrase what I said earlier in this week, I believe Richard Allen is currently being ill-served by his defense team.
Oh, yeah. We're beyond that, in my opinion.
And maybe part of it is because they are rushing to meet this trial date. And if, less than a month or so before the trial, you're finding out that the witnesses you thought supported you don't support you and all this other stuff going on, and you're looking at geofencing data and you think it says something, but maybe you're not looking at it carefully enough, you don't fully understand it, then maybe it's a sign you need more time to prepare.
I can tell you this. When I Google geofencing, one of the first things that comes up is that it's not a pinpoint. That's not a secret. That's not a trade secret. That's pretty well documented in other cases that a tiny bit of research would have said. But that to me is not quite as bad as not checking with somebody who's going to be your bombshell guy on this Odinism thing beforehand and ensuring that you're all on the same page here. Yeah, that was messed up. Yeah, they did misrepresent me. That just seems like just basic stuff.
Again, if this level of lawyering continues, he will be convicted. And I think at the end of the day, no matter what your feelings are about the case, you do not want to see Richard Allen convicted because of sloppy lawyering. You want him to be either convicted or acquitted based upon evidence we can believe in and rely on. And to whatever extent this is not willful, to whatever extent it's just negligence because you're rushing around and don't have time, maybe make the time and don't rush to meet a trial date unless you are fully prepared and are willing and able to present witnesses and arguments that stand up to scrutiny.
Babe Ruth would call his shots, right? He'd point the baseball bat to show he was going to get a home run. But you know what? If you do that and then you strike out and then fall on your face in the dirt, then that feels like what we're seeing again and again here. And it's gotten to the point where, listen, lawyers make mistakes. Lawyers are human. They're trying their best. Maybe they're running around. Maybe they're time strapped. But when we're seeing the same pattern occur again and again and again, it becomes a situation where I don't know what to make of it because it's Sideshow Bob stepping on rake after rake after rake. I mean, when is this going to stop? When is this going to get serious? This is a man facing life in prison and his family facing him possibly getting convicted and taken away from them forever. And I don't understand why this defense has consistently played to the media, played to social media, focused on all this flashy stuff in their filings instead of making sure there's no sloppy mistakes. And as you said, fighting on, what about the bullet? Ballistics evidence has increasingly come under attack in this country. Jump on that. There's so much to be done regarding what the evidence is against him from the confessions. Maybe there is a mental health reason for that. Maybe you can focus on that. But all of this, it's not even about having an outlandish theory or anything. It's just about just sloppiness.
And let me be clear. There's this stuff that they're completely have apparently misrepresented the words of Professor Turco. All of that stuff makes the defense lawyers look sloppy and bad.
At best.
At best. But it doesn't even touch on the issue of innocence or guilt of Richard Allen. The defense attorneys could have completely bungled the ball with Professor Turco, but Richard Allen could still be innocent. But if you get in front of a jury and you misrepresent witnesses and you make arguments that aren't true, the jury's not going to believe you. So I'm concerned.
I think they're in a. I think what I get the sense of is that this is formed into a little bubble, and it's like we play to that bubble rather than, what actually makes sense here. I mean, that's the only reasoning I can come up with for this, because I'm shocked by this. Again, I told you I had a weird feeling about the Turco stuff, like citing two sentences in their interpretation of it just felt off. But I was figuring, well, it's going to just be a very kind of down the middle thing, and maybe there'll be an understandable reason for them interpreting it that way. And what we got was seemingly he's basically disavowing everything they say. And this was the Purdue professor that they chose to make an issue of, filing after filing.
And also at the same time, they were saying that Lieutenant Holman was a liar. And Turco is now saying, no, Lieutenant Holman was not a liar.
I'm just like, they're not serving their client well with any of this. They need to get their act together in order to go to trial. Because,
and if that means delay the trial, then delay And as I said, if this sort of stuff, if this pattern continues in front of a jury, they will lose. And Richard Allen would be convicted. And at the end of the day, I don't want it to be based on sloppy lawyering, the verdict.
No, I want it to be a fair trial. Listen, he chose to bring them back, so I feel like he'll have a hard time arguing that he had ineffective counsel later on, even if that's what it ends up looking like. But I don't feel like this sort of thing serves him. So all I can say is that I sincerely hope that things change and things tighten up going into trial, because this is not it.
I think that's all we have to say on this, right?
Yes.
I just want to make a quick scheduling note. We have a production schedule there. So we did this episode at the time we were going to be doing an episode on crowdfunding. So now we're going to do the crowdfunding episode. We're going to record that tomorrow and release it Friday, which means there won't be a cheat sheet this week. And for people who listened to last week's cheat sheet, the person who saw me with the fish sandwich is going to be a special guest on our Patreon Live this week.
Thanks, everyone, for listening.
Thank you for listening. Bye. Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.